Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 542, I Had No Cause to Be Awake. Now, in many ways, we're back to poem 324. You'll maybe remember this little poem. Some keep the Sabbath going to church. I keep it staying at home with a bobolink for a chorister and an orchard for a dome. Some keep the Sabbath in surplice. I just wear my wings. And instead of tolling the bell for church, our little sexton sings. God preaches, a noted clergyman, and the sermon is never long. So instead of getting to heaven at last, I'm going all along. Now, when this poem was published in 1891, it was titled Following. Now, although the word death is not mentioned in this poem, many have constituted it as in fact a poem about death, and we'll have to argue how you guys read it. Now, our assumption is that you've been following our stuff at LearnStrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hoping you worked through our set of introductory comments as well as the preceding 541 poems. We just finished with 541, Some Such Butterfly. Now, the scholar priest has called this a strange poem, and when we read it, I think you'll understand why he said this. I think this is a poem about choosing, and I think it's a poem about saying, I'm going to choose the life of the poet, even if that means losing some of my peace. She says it this way. I had no cause to be awake, my best was gone to sleep, and morn a new politeness took, and failed to wake them up. But call the others clear, and pass their curtains by, sweet morning, when I overslept, not recollect to me. I looked at sunrise once, and then I looked at them, and wishfulness in me arose for a circumstance the same. 'Twas such an ample peace, I could not hold a sigh. 'Twas Sabbath while the bells divorced, 'twas sunset all the day. So, choosing but a gown, and taking but a prayer, the only raiment I should need, I struggled, and was there. Now, I think choosing and struggle are going to be the two words that will pull this poem together. Why the poem was called Following, I think, is an interesting question. I think this is a poem about choosing and a decision to follow or not to follow those who one has lost. Notice she says, I had no cause, I looked at sunrise. So this will be our construction of the first three stanzas, right? I had no cause to be awake. My best was gone to sleep. Now, some have seen this as death. Some have said this is like motivation or inspiration being gone. And notice mourning is always an important symbol for Emily. A new politeness took and failed to wake them up. In other words, if we're talking about those who have gone before, who have already passed, those who have died, but call the others clear and pass their curtains by. Now, is she speaking about the dead going by and not looking through the curtains of the house? Or is she speaking about the motivations that have been a part of her life? Pass their curtains by. Sweet morning, notice the dash then, when I oversleep. Now, is this death, or is this somehow a forgetting of a kind when one is not awake? Knock. And then I think this word recollect to me. So we go from I to me. I looked at sunrise dash once dash, and then I looked at them. Now, again, are these the choices that she must make, or those who have gone before? And wishfulness in me arose. For circumstance the same. Now, for those who read this as she's talking about death, she's suggesting that there's a moment maybe where she says, I'm thinking that maybe those who have already gone, who have died, have it better off. 'Twas such an ample peace, and there it is. In other words, those who have already died get to enjoy a certain level of peace that she's clearly not enjoying. It could not hold a sigh. In other words, it's as if she's imagining what it would be like to not have to deal with the challenges of her life. And then she calls it Sabbath. Now, Sabbath again takes us back to 324. It's her only other use of the word Sabbath. With the bells divorced, 'twas sunset all the day. In other words, the grave. So choosing but a gown. Notice it's not choosing the grave, it's the gown, right? And you'll remember this white dress from 271, 325, 388. I think the choosing is the key. The gown and raiment will bring the poem together. And taking but a prayer. The only raiment I should need. Now, raiment is a key word. In other words, Emily is interested in what you wear in your dress. We saw this already, raiment, in 473. We'll see it again in 680. When we get to 1262, we're going to play the game this way. I cannot see my soul, but know 'tis there, nor ever saw his house nor furniture, who has invited me with him to dwell. But a confiding guest consult as well, what raiment honor in the most, that I be adequately dressed, for he ensures to none, lest men speciful adorn, procuring him perpetual dressed, by dating it a sudden feast. The idea of, again, garments. When we get to poem 1371, how fit his umber coat, the tailor of the nut, combined without a seam like raiment of a dream, who spun the auburn cloth, computed how the girth, the chestnut aged grows in those perpetual clothes. We know that we are wise, accomplished in surprise, yet by this countryman, this nature, how undone. The question marks of that poem we'll have to come back to when we do this poem. Notice the only raiment I should need, and then I struggled and was there. In other words, I could have gone elsewhere, but I choose to be here. And I think that's the point at 2a. We are the choices that we make. At 2b, I think this word raiment is a key word here. And at 3a, obviously the poems we've shared, 473, 680, 1262, and 1371. Finally, to own a poem like this, when was a time that you had to make an important or difficult choice? That is to say, you had to choose what kind of raiment you were going to don. Thank you.